Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your own inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today in the podcast is Ken Pilot. Ken is a seasoned retail executive and founder of Ken Pilot Ventures. With operating experience in various C-level roles at The Gap, J. Crew, Ralph Lauren, American Eagle, and ABC Carpet and Home, to name a few. He was also the co-founder and CEO of Robot Galaxy and has an advisory practice that focuses on advancing direct-to-consumer methodology through technology and use of space. We're going to get into it. And over the past 7 years, Ken has invested and serves as an operating partner in various technology companies, primarily focusing on retail and e-com. And we're going to get into it. He has a wealth of information to share, a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to chop it up. Ken Pilot, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Adam. It's great to be here. Good to be on the other side of the mic, so to speak.
It's fun to be on the other side of the mic instead of asking all the questions here. And anybody who's watching any of the clips or the video, Ken has a wonderful step and repeat behind him for his show, The Retail Pilot, which we will certainly talk about. But we're going to hit the rewind button and play a little This Is Your Life, Ken Pilot, on this morning episode here. So as far back as I can see, you've been in retail. What got you there, right? Like, did you come out of school and like, I want to work in retail? Like, how does one get into the retail industry?
I was always an entrepreneur from as far back as I can remember. I was figuring out ways to put a few bucks in my pocket, going back to shoveling driveways, stringing tennis rackets, developing black and white film, whatever it took for me to do to make a few bucks. That was it. And that really led me on my journey through high school, college, picking up odd jobs. I played on the tennis team at Colgate, and I actually sold shirts out of my room. There were a brand called Boast, and it looked like a pot leaf on the shirt, but it's actually a Japanese maple leaf. And I put
the old confusion.
Colgate over the leaf, and it was like I was selling those like crazy. So that was sort of my first hand-to-hand combat with true retail. And from there on, I just got into the channel.
You got into was that your first role out of school, right into retail?
My first job out of school was teaching tennis. I ran a tennis camp for about 1 year, and then realized I probably needed an adult job, and ended up in the Macy's training program.
It's interesting these right. So these large retailers, right? It didn't scare you off, did it?
Back then, the Macy's training program was sort of the Harvard of training programs. It was a tough one to get into. So for, I think, $18,500, I decided, yeah, this is right for me. And I jumped in and started my career in New York, working at Macy's Herald Square as a trainee.
It's so crazy. I have a friend, Greg. If he's listening, Greg Kahn, shout out to you. Right out of school, and we're talking. When did I graduate? 20 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that at this point. That I've been out of college longer than I was in college. That's an interesting inflection point. But Greg joined Macy's, went through the training program, and he's been there since. And he worked his way up and has a great career, benefits, and makes good money there. And it's just interesting when you look at people's career trajectories, how they get into it and how they stay in that field. We were doing our research, and one of the points that came out to me, and I think it really has to do with this entrepreneurship spirit that you have, is in all these organizations, Ken, you saw and observed things that weren't working from a technology, a logistics, and ops perspective, and you found ways to innovate. Were there times when that was met with resistance? How did you manage that?
Yeah, there were a few different points in my career that I went on maybe a bit of a tangent or took a different path within a company. I sort of view myself as an intrapreneur because I got to do entrepreneurial things inside of big companies, which is great because then you get to use their money to try out what it is that you want to experiment with. So probably the biggest example of that was the day I was told when I was working at Gap that you were going to run, Ken, you're going to run the Gap outlet business. And I was like, well, that's great, but there isn't one. And they said, exactly, go build it. I'm like, wow, I became an instant leper within a
Hmm.
fat company because we were all about full price sales.
Right. But do you think they're trying to like did you see it as they were trying to move you out to another division, or did you see it as they recognized that you had this innate ability to create an event and they were fostering that? Like how did you take it back then early in your career?
The answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Um, I felt both both things. It was they were trying to leverage my ability to go build something, and then also realize an opportunity out there that Gap wasn't addressing. This goes back to God. Now I'll date myself, but probably 1994, 93, when we started on the path of building Gap Outlet. And again, there was maybe one or two stores that were just poor performing Gap stores
Hmm.
that became an outlet because they just sold markdowns. But
Right.
we weren't in the outlet business. We weren't in the outlet centers. We weren't going after it the way other companies like Ralph Lauren or Tommy Hilfiger were,
Nike.
Nike. And it's for any retailer that's in the outlet space, it's probably the most profitable division they have. It's a moneymaker.
I mean, there's an optics to it. Correct me if I'm wrong too, because not everything. Like, there's loss leaders. Let's have a little lesson here for everybody. There's loss leaders when you like. Let's think about Nike. You think you're going to go in there and you're going to get a pair of Jordans for half price. We were out in the one near Hershey Park over the summer, and I'm like, that's a full price J right there, but it's right next to some weird sneaker that no one would ever buy. That's almost 70% off, right? So get you in the door with the loss leader, and then get you on the upsell because you're already in there and you see something that you like. And then you're also moving distressed inventory, which otherwise would be, I don't know, destroyed, written off. I mean, tell us. Let's. I can't believe I'm actually interested in this. Tell us how the outlet business works.
So the outlet business, anyone that does a good job in the outlet business isn't selling distressed inventory. Okay. They're making inventory for their stores, just like
Mm-hmm.
any division or brand makes inventory for their stores. You can't run a business and be successful on mistakes alone. So the power of an outlet division is you have excellent hindsight. You know what worked in the past. And all you got to do is repeat that and provide it to the customer at 30% less. Now, when you're providing goods at 30 or 40% less, if you look at some of these markups today, that still enables you to actually have a maintained margin of over 50%, which
It's
is
good
really
business.
good. And then when you look at the further economics of the outlet, which is really the real estate cost, it's so much less. That's where the profitability comes into play. So when I was at Gap, we started with, two stores that were poor performing inner city stores. We ended up closing those, and then over the next 36 months opened up 100 Gap outlet locations and delivered over $500 million in revenue.
Unbelievable.
So that was the tangent. That was something that wasn't there that I was asked to address. And at the time when I was asked, I wasn't the most excited guy because why me? It was really why me? Why am I being asked to run an outlet business when we're in the fashion business?
Was there a kind of inflection point, critical moment when you were in this outlet business? You're like, you know what? They chose me for a reason, and I'm kicking ass here. I see the opportunity, and now it's kind of like let the numbers talk and see what Ken has done here.
It happened. I was recognized, and I was then promoted to run the Gap International business. And then from that, I went on to run the Gap brand global business. So it certainly helped move my career forward. Something at the time when I was selected, again, I didn't see it really as a net positive, but it became probably one of the most pivotal points in my career.
So you worked your way up the ladder at the Gap. What was one of those lessons learned the hard way from a managerial leadership position? You were building teams, you were hiring people, you were interviewing. So as far as team building, what was one of those hard lessons learned? Maybe something you thought was the right way to do it when building a team that maybe backfired or didn't your
Uh,
hypothesis
that's,
didn't work out on hire?
that's easy question to answer, Adam. As I just mentioned, I went from running Gap International to Gap Global. So we had stores in 5 countries, and then excluding the US. And then I was brought in to run the US as well. And I thought, and I was mistaken, that every buyer could manage 6 countries versus trying to keep it keep the buying localized or have teams that were more focused on areas of the world. So I moved the organization to that model, and that was not a successful move. It overwhelmed people. And frankly, the importance of the US business far outweighed what was happening in Germany or France, which were small businesses. I mean, the size of the business in Germany at the time was smaller than the business that we were doing at 34th and Broadway, which was our
That's
number one
crazy.
Gap store. But so you think about it, you can go to your Gap store on 34th and Broadway, see more volume than you would in all of Germany, and not have to eat what I consider to be some challenging food in Germany. I mean, if you've ever been to Germany, the day starts with breakfast meats. I mean,
It's a heavy it's a heavy meal. I've had the opportunity. Usually, it's absorbing the night before, but if you're there working on a day-to-day basis instead of partying or tourism, it's a little bit different.
I mean, I love the pretzels. I get that. That works. But the breakfast meat thing is rough. And, anyway, so that was a move that I regret making, a lesson learned. I moved too quickly, too fast, which is something that I find myself doing from time to time. And you need to course correct.
Well, that's an interesting one, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but as a seasoned investor and people leader too, balancing speed to respond to market conditions, to take advantage of an opportunity versus slowing down to ensure you're doing things the right way. How do you find that balance?
It's tough. I do like to draft and craft,
Draft
but
and
I
craft.
draft
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
craft. Uh,
Good word.
it's the balance is always difficult because taking too long to make a decision, if it is right, can also be a failure. Trying obviously to do something without enough information can be a failure. Identifying the balance is not so easy, but I definitely err to the I'd rather make a mistake more quickly and course correct and take
Get
too
it out of the
long.
way.
It wasn't the right move. Easier when you're working alone, much more difficult when you have a bigger team because the impact on me to course correct is much easier. The impact on the team, much more difficult.
Right, and you're absorbing more of it when you have a bigger team as a leader. So I want to talk a little bit about getting back on track with the career trajectory, leaving the retail world. Keep me straight here. Launching Robot Galaxy, I think that was 2007. What was the impetus behind it? What was the vision?
So, with a partner, Oliver Mitchell, whose concept it was, we got together and fleshed out this concept. And it was at a very high level, build a bear for boys.
Right, so it's
Something for the
retail,
boys.
entertainment, online. 2007, things were pumping up. How do you bring it together?
Yeah.
So it's
So we
build a bear for boys or men or adult men,
boys, no boys. This is
children.
definitely was definitely
Okay,
targeting kid space, something for the dad and lad, if you will, to do
dad
in the
and lad.
store versus the mom and daughter,
Yeah.
which is clearly much more of a build a bear experience. So we put together the concept. We hired a great guy for store design, and we built the stores to look like a spaceship. And the kids would come into the store. We
Hmm.
had 5 characters, which all came to life in our Robot Galaxy comic book. The kids would build their robot. They'd bring them to the seventh ring of Saturn, which was this phenomenal centerpiece in the store where their robot would actually go up into this orb, light
Mm.
up with a loud sound. And then the kid would take the robot back on Earth, plug it into a computer, put his name in, add a few other words, and
Personalizations. Yep.
yeah, then he could play with the robot at home online, an
Interesting.
MMOG, I think mass online game, play other kids who had robots. So we had comic books covered, we had a store experience covered,
You had
we
the
had
narrative, you had everything going.
yeah. The
And what
only thing that
happened?
we didn't have covered was the fact that the world went to shit in 2008 when we hit the recession. At this point, we had already opened up 2 locations, one in Paramus, one in Freehold, New Jersey, and we had just opened up our third location inside of Times Square Toys R Us,
Wow.
up on the second floor, overseeing the store. So we had great real estate, and we were killing it. And then basically got killed by the economy.
because people stop shopping as much.
Yeah, it was a
I
bigger
mean,
price point, and it business just slowed, and it got
how
tougher. We
did?
had a term sheet from Disney, and
Oh
there
wow,
was no credit to be had.
jeez. How did that? Did you take that failure personally, or were you able to really can attribute that to the economy and move forward? Like, is
I,
it?
I
Let's pause it. Like for an entrepreneur, like how do you separate taking? Like you put your like I hear it in the way you even talk about something from that long ago. 2007 was that long ago. Um, this is your baby. You had a concept. You built it. You're excited. This was like, and then it went to shit. Like, how does that sit with you? How do you process it?
Well, you take it I took it very personally. First of all, as you launch these businesses, whether it's a tech platform or it's a new clothing company, when it's a startup, you're out there
Mm-hmm.
raising money from friends and family, along with your own money. So, we lost money. I lost friends' money, family money, my money. So yeah, that didn't feel good. It was a great experience. It was a lot of fun building the
I'm sure.
concept. My partner Oliver, who is also he is a creative genius, and he's really into robots. He's still out there today playing in the robot space, although the real robotic space, not the toy space. So we really put all that we could into this, and it's too bad there wasn't an exit. But hey, it happens.
Do you think there's still something there that could be reinvented? We were talking before about the metaverse, Web3 technology out there. I mean, for me personally, I think gaming is really going to be the killer app to mass adoption in Web3. Is there a second life or rebirth for Robot Galaxy? Is there? You think about augmented reality and interactive retail
Oh,
shopping experiences. Like, let's dig into that. Is there still something there? Is there still a kernel
there
of
is.
idea that could be blown out,
I
explored?
mean, you look at it today, where robotics is today, and there are other robotics concepts out there. It's just a matter of the space you want to cover. Is it a toy, or is it part of science? And there are STEM programs out there
Right.
today where you get in and you're learning about robotics. There's programming, there's AI, there's so much
Mm-hmm.
more that's happening. It just depends how it gets packaged. But the galaxy of robots is huge.
I mean, I
To
think
answer
about
your
this. I and this is where my head is spinning there, Ken. Yeah. My daughter, 11 years old, she's into fashion. She loves shopping online. She knows her style. She knows her brand. She also does STEAM, STAAM. It's STEAM. Um, she's doing robotics. She's playing in the metaverse as far as like Fortnite and Roblox and creating
Yep.
TikTok videos. I think that there's still a very ripe idea there for these young girls and boys, teens, preteens, to have this interactive experience. Like, how do you bring it all together in the metaverse and create these? I mean, we talk about the metaverse and this land grab early on. We're still trying to figure it out, but all these brands were looking to buy virtual real estate next to Snoop Dogg, and they bought them, right? They bought these virtual plots. So I think there's a lot there, and I'm optimistic. I still think we're in the first at bat of the first inning here.
Yeah,
But if you infuse this kind of early thinking and innovation and take it to where we are now, I mean, there's some meat on the bone, Ken.
there is. If you again started with a store experience and know that it starts,
Mm-hmm.
on Earth and then evolves to
Phygital.
the meta. There's a path there. There's a way to go. It's almost as if you were to take this robot or whatever it is you built, and where else would it live? Because now you actually have created something that's tactile and allowing it to live anywhere. So maybe there's the concept.
Or maybe if like you're able to kind of program your own virtual shopper, right? Like if you're able to like it takes your AI your preferences and it's scouring. I mean, they have them out there, right? These bots that
Yeah.
kind of know your preferences and they're self-serving. Anyway, I want to flip on it and I want to talk about these legacy retailers that have gone out the door. Like we talk about Sears, JC Penney and all that. Like what causes some of them to survive and some of them to fall away? Like is it lack of innovation? Is it trends? I mean, if we talked 20 years ago and you told me that J.C. Penney or well, longer than that, like Penny's and Macy's would be where they are now from a business perspective, would you have predicted it?
There's still, even when you look at a Macy's, there's still a dominant player in the retail space. There's a lot of stores.
Well, they've
There
also
are
have the home division, the outdoor stuff, their right
there's
furniture.
there, they're still a large player. The challenge that all retailers and brands face today, and you mentioned it, is innovation. It's creating newness. It's creating an emotional tie to the brand or the store. I worked a number of years with Gap. I think Gap, probably pound for pound, whether it's the Gap division, Banana Republic, or Old Navy, they probably make some of the best quality product at the price there is. The question is, what is the emotional draw
Mm,
they're creating to pull me into the store? Because I could be pulled into another store. I could go to a Uniqlo, or I
right.
could go to a Zara or an
How does
H&M. I need an emotional tie to a brand. So
how is
innovation and marketing.
I mean, how has Gap done it over the years? I mean, Gap. I mean, I'm a little bit biased. I mean, my tastes have changed. I started at the Gap, but then I went Banana Republic, and they're progressing you through your age and your demographic. And I mean, I dress my 5-year-old in Gap stuff. It also helps that there's a Gap on the corner in Long Island here in Merrick that makes it. And that store has been there for, you probably know longer than me. That location I think has been there for 30 plus years, if I had to guess.
One of the better locations they've had. Yeah. Believe me, if it wasn't a good location, it wouldn't be on the earth anymore. It'd be in the metaverse. Actually, it'd be
Yeah,
in the graveyard.
it would be, but that's these legacy brands. What's a bold? Let's make a bold prediction here. What's going to be the next latest and greatest retailer? What's the next innovation? What's happening out there?
It's so much right now is happening around footwear that when I look at the landscape, it's sort of where the energy is, whether it's an On Running or a Hoka, or even like what Skechers is doing with the slip in. There's
They
a
pivoted.
big push in comfort. And you look at Hoka, which really started
My
as a
brother loves them. My brother swears by them.
they're great. I mean, they have a specific look. Let's leave it there.
Right.
And if my good friend Dave Powers is listening, is the CEO of Deckers, we had a great podcast together. It's an acquired taste for the style of sneaker they make, but from a comfort perspective, they're killing it. And then also from a true authentic perspective in terms of it being used for sport, they're
Hmm.
killing it. And then you look at someone like On Cloud, like those guys are also killing it. Same thing, comfort. Comfort's becoming more and more important. Everybody's into their steps. How far am I walking every day? We're looking at our phones, our watches. And then the other thing too about the sneaker business, it's one way that everybody kind of shows a brand.
Loyalty, affinity.
It's a brand. You look at they've got Nike, they got Brooks, they've got Saucony, that whatever it is, because a lot of our clothing is brandless. I mean, there are people out there that are wearing high-end design that want to show it's Prada or Louis
Right.
Vuitton, whatever it is, but a lot of people don't. More people don't because they can't afford it. But the sneaker kind of says, "Oh, he's a
Right.
Nike guy, an Adidas
I
guy."
mean, Jordan.
So there's a bit of self-branding
I
around
mean,
that,
that
right?
sneakers are where it's at. I mean, look what we were talking before. What Nike has done with Artifact, like taking it to the next level of customization and owning a digital and creating your own customized sneaker in the metaverse, and then having it delivered to you a month later, right? Like people are owning it. Talk about brand
Yeah,
affinity. If I could design my own Nike and have it, I'm sticking with that and I'm showing it off.
yeah. And Nike's been doing that for a while. So I love what's happening in footwear. I think that's probably one of the stronger businesses today. And then there are smaller brands out there that are just very focused on their lane that do a great job around keeping that brand DNA intact. That's the hardest part. How do I continue to make my brand stand for what it is that helped build this brand? I just met with the Veronicas,
I'm
Veronica
unfamiliar.
Beard. I don't know if you know, but they're two sister bars. They're both named Veronica, and the
Wait. Both
company's named
sisters are named
Veronica Beard.
Veronica.
And they've done
How
yes, and they're both
how does that?
they're
And are they twins?
co-CEOs. No, they're
Oh, okay. So they're
sister-in-laws. They
not
they
really okay.
married brothers.
Thank you. I was like, if I
They
named
married
both my
brothers.
kids Nina or both my kids Oliver, it'd be a weird thing.
No, no. But try doing a podcast with
And
Veronica and Veronica.
and is that
It's
even a nickname
Veronica.
for
What's your name?
Veronica?
Yeah.
Is there
Anyway,
a V? Like,
so
is
but
there like Ken, Kenny, Kenna, Ken? Like, there's multiple versions of like Adam, adds like
no,
Veronica. Like, is there?
no, you just hit the initials. That's all.
Yeah.
VSM. It's whatever. So But we talked about how they've done a great job building their brand, but keeping their DNA intact. And you can go back to other brands that are like that as well. I mean, even the designer brands, high end, I mean, their ability, Chanel,
Hmm.
to keep its brand intact, to always be on brand. And that's critical to building brands. That's the most important thing. And keeping it new and fresh. Brands that fail to
So let's
innovate, they
talk about
die.
that for a moment. And the one that's really stood out to me lately is Crocs. And I see it from, I put my marketing hat on and I see it from a brand partnership perspective, what they've done. And keep me straight on the history here. I mean, Crocs kind of faded out for a bit. You know, they were kind of known as the chef shoe, and then all of a sudden they came back in fashion a couple of years ago, and they're the hottest thing. And they innovated in a couple different ways. They innovated the product itself. They have now a Croc that's lined that my kids have for the winter, which is great. My little dude goes to jujitsu and he just throws those Crocs on with the liners. I don't even have to worry about it. They're awesome. And then the gibbets, this fad with the gibbets, the collectible element. And you have these kids, you have brands that are creating, you have partnerships. We talk about Gary V, my former boss, his V Friends brand. They just launched gibbets for that. Everyone and their mother has gibbets. You go on Amazon, gibbets, collecting, trading. That creates stickiness. Let's use that word in retail and in shopping, stickiness, which is brand affinity and keeping you with the product there. What's your thoughts on the Crocs story, Ken?
I think you nailed it. They were hot and then they were not, and they're hot again. It, but it does show you when you step back that you can go from hot to
Mm-hmm.
not to hot. So even going back to Gap, is there? And I guess we've all been waiting for the resurgence or the rebirth of Gap, and maybe they now have a new CEO. We'll see if he's the guy that can make it happen. But I think with big brands like that,
Mm-hmm.
often partnerships can be helpful. That said, clearly their
I was
partnership
about to
with
say
Yeezy
that was an
was a bit
interesting one.
challenging. But again, following on that, they just did a partnership with Love Shack Fancy that was extremely
Collabs.
successful. So that drove business. The collaboration drove volume. It created awareness and it made them relevant. Now, how do you take that energy and make it bigger and make it more a part of the brand to drive the brand forward? And they got to figure it out. But it just shows you that the brand, they created an emotional connection for the product that drove customers to the store.
So was the launch of Ken Pilot Ventures was just a logical, you're moving into this phase of your career, your industry expertise to put yourself in this position to incubate, to consult, and to build. Talk to us about the birth and the vision of Ken Pilot Ventures.
It was sort of towards the end of my involvement running businesses when I was at ABC Home. I
Great store, by the
started
way.
to get involved with technology. Yeah,
We
it
went there in
was.
the
It was
city to
a it
find
was a
things that we
great
liked and
store.
then bought them elsewhere for less. Inspiration.
Right. That
It was also
was a
here's a
big
little
store for
secret tip for
inspiration.
me. That was one of my secret bathrooms in New York City. I knew exactly where to go. There was one downstairs and there was one on the, I think, third floor, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I was like, I'm walking in there. I don't look like I'm homeless
Yep.
off the streets. I know it's going to be a clean bathroom. So there's a positive secret New York City bathrooms. Also some hotels, but I'll leave it.
Third floor bathroom gone, by the way, because they're just down to one floor.
I've
Just
not been there in
FYI, if you
years.
haven't been there recently. Yeah. So I started, a friend of mine, Ken Seif, got me to invest in a fund called Beanstalk Ventures. And within the fund, there were a bunch of retail technology platforms. And in fairness, I was never that excited about technology throughout my career. If I got pulled into a tech meeting, that had to mean that our cash registers in the store were no longer working. We couldn't take money
How do
from
we get money?
customers. Otherwise, I didn't need to be in the. Yeah. So I got pulled into this space, started to meet with these different platforms, and realized, God, if I had had one of those platforms when I was running this or doing that, I wouldn't have made the following mistakes. So I began to identify technology that would have helped me correct all the mistakes I made while I was running different businesses. And today I'm probably up to, I don't know, 10 to 12 different platforms that I have investments in. And I work with the founders, talk to them about what I think is important, but probably most importantly, help them see the space from the outside in versus the way they view it, which is
Right. So
really
you're seeing
from
the
the
blind
inside
spots.
out.
You're taking up to 30,000 foot view. You're infusing your industry experience. When you're evaluating a potential investment, how do you balance investing in the horse versus the jockey?
It is a balance, and you're looking at first, do I like the jockey? Because if I don't like the jockey, I'm not gonna care about his horse. Because ultimately you're working with the leader throughout the process. So you have to have a connection with the person, feel that their horse, their product is really addressing a problem, how it's addressing the problem, how then I would take it back and apply it to the retail space, how I would actually tell a CEO about what it is that they do versus the way they tell someone what they do. And they're generally quite different. Just take a look at any vendor's website and you'll be somewhat perplexed as to what they do versus what I can tell you that they do. Um, so it's understanding what they do, the problem that they're solving, and the team that they're building, and who they're doing it for if it's later stage, and the success they're seeing, along with the business model. So there are a number of things to consider, and it all depends on what stage you're jumping in. Typically now I'd like to get in at a stage where a platform has at least
Hmm.
one customer. Very difficult to do purely startup
Right.
where there are no customers, because you'll hear more often than not, hey, come back to
Right.
me
So you're
when
not
you
at the
have
MVP level, right?
someone,
You're
and
not at the
then let's
MVP
take a
level.
look.
You want to see it as an actual in market, or at least like getting there, beta testing. You want to see it.
Yes.
How do you what's the steps when you realize that you made a wrong decision and you need to punch out? Have you done that?
It Yeah, either
Right.
that or they get punched out, not by me per
Yeah.
se, but the market drops them. I've had two platforms that just fail to cross the finish line or stay in the race, I should say. I got a number of
Hmm.
guys out there in the race. I'd like if you got
Believe me.
to cross the finish line, that would be nice and that'd be good. But I've had some partial exits along the way, which has been exciting. But sometimes, yeah, you realize, hey, this isn't right for me. I can't be helpful to you, and I step back from my involvement in the
Yeah,
company.
it's a
It
tough one. So
happens.
let's pivot and let's talk about this podcast that I see behind you 12 times behind me. I'm just guessing how many. The Retail Pilot. What was your impetus for launching a podcast?
Fortunately for me, I've kept good relationships. I've made a lot of friends over my time in retail. A number of CEOs that I keep in contact with, and I thought it would be just a great way to keep my head in the game, keep the conversations going, and share some what I think are valuable lessons with those who want to understand what the journeys are like for CEOs of different brands and different retailers out there. So pull that all together. And it's a great way for me to be connected to the space I
I
love,
love
which
it.
is
And we were
retail.
talking offline before about my podcast journey, and what did you learn about yourself a couple of shows in, right? Because people go into podcasting, and you're somewhat of a public figure. You're an accomplished people leader. You've led organizations, so I assume you're pretty comfortable being on the front facing side of marketing and communications. But podcasts, these are work, man, and they take practice and reps. What is something that you learned about yourself through the podcast that you needed to maybe adjust to make the show better, to make yourself a better host?
Probably the most important thing was
Hmm.
phrasing the questions. You know, how do you put it out there so that you can get the best response, be concise? So, asking the questions, finding points of interest that were just a little bit maybe off the beaten track that you didn't know. And then also being able to go deep with whoever I'm talking to about what they're experiencing or what they experienced. I mean, I've had conversations with Andy Dunn, who battles with bipolar disorder, or Steve Madden and I talked about
Wow.
jail
So you
time.
went into it.
Mark Metrick, who's the CEO of Saks. he was challenged with alcoholism and how he overcame it. So finding some personal stories and how they dealt with those challenges, I thought that was part of having to dig in
Mm-hmm.
and do your research so that you came prepared to the podcast and could ask questions that people would
I mean,
really
that's
be
really what it's all
interested in.
about. And I always say when I coach other podcasters, I go, if you're not interested as a host, the audience is going to hear it. They're going to hear that you're bored. They're going to hear that you're not
Yeah.
into it. And I think that's a sign of a good, listen, not everybody is meant to be a podcast host. You may think it, maybe your company is putting down an initiative and saying, hey, let's give it a shot and try it. But if you're not feeling it and you're not, and it takes reps too, but if you're not feeling it, you're going to hear it on the other side. And it's about being inquisitive. My big aha moment was about 25, 30 episodes in, and somebody that I trust, they said, Adam, I'm listening to your show. It's good. You're getting there. But I could hear you thinking about the next question. You're cutting the guest off. You're jumping ahead. I was like, oh shit, I need to just pause and listen. And it's just you said before, now I'm able to hear things and take that right turn, that left turn, go down a rabbit hole. And there's certain guests that I have on that are promoting a book, they're promoting something, and they have their talking points, and they're going to try to jam those down your throat. So if you could find a way to find those interesting intersection points and bring out topics that they maybe have not discussed and maybe are deeply personal, controversial, whichever way you want to go, that's what makes for an exciting show. Now, on the surface, I think if I just look at your show, I think that's kind of niche. Why do I need to get into that? But the word leaders in there and legends, that's what's going to excite me. I want to hear about how they got there. What did they learn? And then you're also infusing this incredible industry knowledge where you're going to get into the trenches, right? You may bring really industry
Yeah.
specific things up that will speak to folks that are in the retail industry, and then folks who just love to hear about how leaders got there. So, what's been like this challenge for you? Where do you want to take the show? What's the vision?
I think in addition to leaders and legends, there's also an opportunity and something I'll look to pivot to or add to next year around tech talk. And that's more about the technology that's
Mm-hmm.
behind retail that's helping evolve the space. And that'll be very focused on specific
I
areas
like
and
it.
specific opportunities. So I see expanding it there. I'm also going to be hosting a conference in January, a tech summit, if you will. So that's something that has really evolved from this. But I want to
Please.
go back to something that you just said, because I think you made a really important point. One of your key learnings, which I would add has been one of my key learnings, which is stop waiting to answer and be ready to listen or ask. And, we go in, as we go into these podcasts with a bit of a game plan, but your ability or my ability to call an audible and go in a different direction because, wow, hold on. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what they just said was going to be said. I find it really interesting. I'm going to spend some time there versus pivoting to my next question because
Of
that could be the
course.
most interesting part of the podcast, which is something you never expected. And then it becomes
I
again, do that again.
and that is the key.
Love that. I
That is the
don't know
key.
what
I'll
the
show you
family.
this bad boy afterwards when we sign off here. But that's a key to
All
that's
right.
a key to podcasting, right? And the more I listen to shows, it's inquisitive, being curious, going down those rabbit holes. With the help of my show producer Chris, who I absolutely adore, we do a lot of prep for each and every episode. I maybe get to half the questions and flow I want to get to, but I have them all there. So it's exactly like a football game. I have all my plays. I'm standing there with that giant
Yeah.
laminated card covering my face
Yeah.
like this, so you can't even see it. But I got it in here, and I'm listening to the coordinators, and we're calling audibles, we're calling plays. I'm looking at the defense, right? I'm looking at the offense. We're switching it up, and that's what makes a great show. So let's bring it home here, Ken. Ken, in your opinion, in your professional and personal experience, what is the greatest retailer of all time, and why? The
Well,
Holy Grail,
there's
the
some big.
Holy Grail.
I've had the good fortune of working with a few. The first, you have to give a shout out to Mickey Drexler. I mean, this guy kind of wrote one of the books, if not the book. He wrote one of the books. A true creative force, a passionate leader, uh,
And what brand is
very
that for
product
folks that don't know?
centric. Could And well, Mickey started his career. He was with Bloomingdale's, and then Ann Taylor ran Gap. Was at J. Crew. He took my job at J. Crew. I was there for 5 months. He said, "Ken, see ya." Actually, he did, and I said, "You do it. I'm out." But Mickey he was amazing, and now he's the chairman of Alex Mill, his son's company. But a true product leader, a true passionate retailer. Roger Farah, who was the COO at Ralph Lauren, another amazing leader. He wasn't the CEO, Ralph was, but Roger, for all intent and purposes, ran the company. An amazing balance of left and right brain. I true respect for what he was able to do as a visionary, as a leader, someone so smart, but also got the creative part as well. It's hard to find people that can understand the importance of finance and IT, as well as the need to have creative and design and the softer side of the business. Lou Frankfurt, another legend in the space, he was the CEO of Coach. I mean, he did an amazing job taking that brand from what it was to really
They also have a good
where
outlet
it is
business too,
today.
Coach.
So Coach has a great outlet business. And
Yeah.
listen, Lou really understood the value of being multi-channel and how well you can serve that channel and still strengthen the brand. So those are few. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but those are some of the legends in the space that I think that have done. And Terry Lundgren did an amazing job building a department store business. And he was at Macy's for a number of years as CEO there. And in fact, I think I have dropping Terry's podcast next week on my, which will be at a different time than this appears.
It's a little
We'll have
back to the
already
future on this show sometimes, right? We have to frame it up here. So I wasn't going to touch on it, and I was really thinking this whole show of how I wanted to get to it, and I'm going to kind of position it this way. In this current political global climate where the world is going to shit, how can and should companies balance, corporate responsibility and doing what's right, but also being mindful of polarizing audiences and at times having to stay neutral, at times deciding that they shouldn't stay neutral at a high level without taking sides or putting you in a corner here. How do you balance it at that high corporate level?
Yeah. Listen, if I had to put out a statement for a public company, you can start at a level where if you can't agree with what I'm about to say, then maybe that's okay to lose that group of customers. And what I would say is the following. I don't think any company, public or private, should support, align, or sponsor terrorist organizations like Hamas or support hatred such as anti-Semitism. And for me, that's a hard stop. After that, I think that countries have a need to be humanitarian and try to support people who are in need around the world.
It should be that simple. It should be good and evil, should have a clear line. But unfortunately, in this world with social media and propaganda and media agendas, it's just not. So I want to put a pin in that conversation here because we could have a whole entire episode about that. And depends how I get up in the morning. If I want to go down that route, if I feel it, or if I just want to focus on things that I can control, my family, my friends, health, wellness, happiness, the things that I can control, versus things that we could support, we could help, but they're a touch out of it. So Ken, let's bring it home here. And I ask all my guests this question, and over 305 episodes, episode 305 here. It's amazing to see this collection of answers. So Ken, what is the single greatest piece of advice that you have received that you take action on daily? This could be a mantra, something you wake up saying that gets you going in the day, something that has resonated, that keeps you locked in, focused. This is called the air cover portion of a podcast host, when we have air cover to allow the guest to...
In enjoy what you do, find humor in what's around you, and try and stay positive.
That is sound advice. And last but not least, you look back on your life and your career, and there was those tough moments we had to dig down deep and come out of the trenches personally, professionally, build a brand back up, build a business, build a personal and professional relationship back up. And you had to harness that inner tenacity to drive you forward. In the same breath, you sit here with gratitude, appreciation for this life, this business, this mission that you're on, that you have created. What keeps you focused? What is your beacon? Ken Pilot, what is your North Star in life?
Honesty.
Keeping it real.
I try and be as truthful, as honest, and transparent as possible, regardless of the blowback that potentially can happen because of that.
Amen. And I agree with you on that. I usually don't comment on someone's North Star, but like if you keep it real and be your true self, nothing to defend. This is who I am. This is what I'm saying. This is what I believe in. And be solid as rock. Ken, I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's been a fantastic conversation. Any final words, thoughts?
No, Adam, I appreciate the opportunity to share where I've been, what I've done, and hopefully this can really serve to replace Ambien for any of your listeners who have a tough time sleeping. They can roll this
Wake
one
up.
out there right about 10:30. Well, generally, my wife will listen to my podcast right about that time.
That's a good one.
We'll put her to sleep.
This is a good one.
Then it
Ken,
works.
thank you so much for joining me. Everyone, you can find out more at kenpilotventures.com. Check out the podcast, The Retail Pilot. You can find it where all great podcasts live, in your ears, in your car, wherever you are. Remember, everyone listening out there, if this show resonated, leave a review, rating. It goes a long way. You know where to find out more, thepodcast.com. Follow us on all the social media channels. I'm going to do something different today. If you want to reach out to me and tell me your thoughts, email me, adam@nhptalentgroup.com. I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts. Do not pitch me or sell me anything that I don't need. I hate throwing it out there, but you can find my email address. Remember, look out for one another. Be good to yourself. Be better to others. And catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.